As students of architecture at Montana State University and as framers of future development and resource use, our study of issues related to growth has become a story of discovery and surprise. Past environmental efforts had created an environment of conflict in our perception that land use and development were unalterably opposed to conservation. Our process of discovery began with listening to numerous speakers engaged on the front lines of land use change. As we received the views, methodologies, observations, and insights of these speakers with later interviews of people engaged in public intervention with growth impacts, discovery became our surprise. We invite you to join in the discovery process with us in the following presentation of highlights from our speakers and interviewees. We hope you will be as positively surprised in the process as we have been by the optimism, collaborations, and public successes of those who serve us and our environment.
Okay, so as we can see, land use patterns in the greater Yellowstone area have changed dramatically in the 20th century. We can illustrate that just by looking at Gallatin County here in these series of maps that we produced. We actually mapped all the locations of all the homes in the county since 1900. And as we go through the maps through the 20th century, we can see that growth has dispersed farther and farther out into the countryside.
This image represents the area which built structures will consume by 2025. We will now look at some of the issues created by this growth.
There have been a lot of impacts to a lot of the waters in Montana, despite what we may otherwise think. There's a lot of areas that have been where bank erosion is a significant problem, or where streams have been straightened out. There are wetlands that have been filled or destroyed that ought to be at some point mitigated or replaced. So there's a lot of work to be done here, and as long as we have development and industry, there's always going to be a need for some form of environmental remediation or restoration following those industries, even if we do it in the best possible way. Anytime we have any kind of an impact, there's a need for some sort of a restoration if we want to maintain our quality of environment.
West Montana is experiencing rapid growth and development, and that's putting a lot of pressure on our water resources. And that's coming about and surfacing in several ways. First of all, there's a major impact on floodplains and their functions. Floodplains, riparian areas provide critical habitat for most of the species that are of concern in Montana for at least part of their life cycle. And they also help the rivers function in a healthy, natural way, sustaining water quality and river dynamics and their fluvial processes.
Things where we can talk about how do we live here in a way that respects people in place, and then it has a lot more to do with conversation. Just definitely that if you give people good information, most of the time they end up making good decisions.
I think that a fundamental aspect of protecting our water quality and quantity is for everyone to understand how they fit into the equation. For people to understand that it's their responsibility to conserve water that comes out of their taps. Also, I think it's important for people to think in the cradle to grave kind of mindset, where you think about what you're using, where it came from, and where it's going to end up. If you're using household cleaners, those things are going to go down the drain, and they don't magically disappear once they go down the drain. They go into a septic system, and a lot of that ends up back in the environment. So people understanding that our water systems are all connected and how they fit into that connection, I think, is a critical understanding for protecting our water quality and quantity.
I think you focus on the process. That's what you focus on. You don't get too worried about the results, because if you think you know what the results are, you're not involved in the process. The process is critical. The process is just like a river. I mean, there's going to be sinuosity in the process, and it'll come up against cliffs that have no give, and so the river responds. And the process is eternal.